Hey, and welcome to Talking the Chosen. Today we are in Season 1, Episode 5, titled The Wedding Gift. Now, the opening scene, after 3 days of searching in Jerusalem, it's somewhere around 8 AD. Mary and Joseph, they finally find the missing 12-year-old Jesus teaching in the temple. Now, immediately you may be asking, if Jesus is 12, how come it's only 8 AD? Most Christians believe that Jesus was born in 0 AD. The truth is, we messed up our calendar. Jesus was born somewhere around 3 or 4 BC. Now, this story is found in Luke chapter 2, beginning at the 41st verse. The scripture tells us every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. Every year, they made this trek from Nazareth, some 91 miles on foot, all the way down to Jerusalem. The truth is, Jewish males were required to attend 3 festivals every year. Now, because of the long distance traveling and the economic impact, usually most Jews, they didn't make it to all 3. But the scripture tells us that every year, Mary and Joseph, they made it to the festival of the Passover. The scripture goes on to say, when Jesus was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. So Jesus is now 12 years old. At the age of 13, they entered into the Jewish religious life. So this is a significant moment in Jesus' life. And the scripture says they went up to the festival. Now, if Nazareth is in northern Israel, and Jerusalem is in southern to mid-Israel, wouldn't they have gone down? No, they literally went up. Don't forget, Jerusalem sits on a mountain. So they literally walked up the mountain to the holy city of Jerusalem. And then I don't know about you, but I find it a little bit disturbing that after the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, they didn't know where Jesus was. The scripture goes on to say, thinking that he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. You see, they traveled in large herds of people. There would have been a large group of people coming from Nazareth all the way down to Jerusalem. And the women, they traveled in the front of the herd. The men would have traveled in the back. So maybe Joseph thought that Jesus was with Mary, and Mary thought that Jesus was with Joseph. Or at least he was with another relative or a friend. Whatever it was, they lost track. And thinking that he was in their company, they traveled for an entire day. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. I would have been aggravated. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. And when his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." It's like, "Son, why have you done this? Your dad, Joseph, and I have been searching for you for days." And Jesus responds, "Why were you searching for me? Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?" Ooh, did you catch that? Did you catch how Jesus kind of contrasted Joseph and God the Father, his Father in heaven? The scripture goes on to say, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. They went down to Nazareth, right? They left the mountain. They descended down to Nazareth with Jesus, and he was obedient to them. But his mother treasured all these things in her heart, and Jesus grew. I love that. Jesus continued to grow in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to raise the Messiah? Pretty difficult, huh? I mean, it's not totally clear how much Mary understood about her son's divine nature. I mean, we know based on Luke chapter 1 and 2 that Mary knew her son was meant to be God's promised Messiah, but I don't think she fully understood his divine nature. I don't think she fully understood everything that went into that. And have you ever really thought about it? I mean, did you ever think about how Jesus needed someone to take care of him when he was a child? That can be kind of weird, can't it? Jesus needed someone to change his diaper. Jesus needed someone to feed him, to teach him words, to teach him skills. We know that his father trained him as a tekton, as a woodworker, a carpenter, a stonecutter. I sit back and think too that the ancients Ancient Christians, they used to think an awful lot about Mary. They used to think a lot about her relationship with Jesus. They painted pictures and created statues, and poets wrote poems about her. You know, the story in this episode is taken from the Gospel of John. In John's Gospel, we see Mary present at both the beginning and the end of Jesus' earthly ministry. It was in John chapter 2, beginning at the first verse. On the third day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. And when the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no more wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." And then if you fast forward all the way to John chapter 19, we see when Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her to his own home. Now, first of all, that term "woman," right? It's like, "Woman, what's wrong with you?" No. It was actually a term of endearment. And here in John chapter 19, do you remember who the disciple whom Jesus loved was? It was John, right? And we know that John took care of Mary until she passed away. I mean, think about those two passages. Mary was at the very beginning of Jesus' ministry, and she was at the very end when Jesus was crucified. Now, have these passages, or has this episode affected the way that you imagine the relationship between Jesus and his mother Mary? I mean, it's kind of powerful, isn't it? I love the interaction that they had together, the honor that Jesus showed to his mother. I love the humor that they showed, and I mean, even the hugs, right? I mean, what does this all reveal to us about Jesus? I mean, Jesus cared about his mother. He had a relationship with her. At the very end, Jesus was making sure that his mother was well cared for. It was in Luke chapter 1. In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. And the virgin's name was Mary. I mean, think about this. Jesus' mother, Mary, didn't just give birth to Jesus. She also nurtured. She took care of him. She raised him for over 30 years. Now, we don't get many stories about those 30 years because Mary's life raising Jesus was probably pretty ordinary. So let me ask you, where was Jesus raised? Oh, that's right. He was born in Bethlehem, remember? But he was raised in Nazareth. In Matthew chapter 2, the scripture tells us that after Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel. For those who are trying to take the child's life are dead." So he got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. Remember, it was the killing of the innocents in Bethlehem. Herod was upset that a newborn king was born, and so he sent the troops in, and every male child under the 2 and under would be put to death. Mary and Joseph, they escaped to Egypt, and when Herod died, they were coming back. But Archelaus, Herod's son, was still ruling. He was a little crazy. And so they decided to leave Archelaus' territory, and they settled in the region of Galilee, specifically in Nazareth. Now, just to kind of give you a quick map. Okay, the arrow at the top of the map, that's Nazareth. It's west of the Sea of Galilee. Some 91 miles to the south, the top dot there, the red dot, that's Jerusalem. And the second dot below, that is Bethlehem. Now, Bethlehem is only about 5 or 6 miles away from Jerusalem. But Mary and Joseph, they raised Jesus in Nazareth. In fact, the scripture identifies Jesus as being Jesus of Nazareth some 17 times. Just real quick trivia. Do you know Jesus' last name? He didn't have one, right? You identified people in the first century by their father's name, by their hometown, by their occupation. He was known as Jesus of Nazareth, or Jesus the carpenter's son. Now, to just give you some background on Nazareth, Nazareth was situated inside a bowl on top of this hill, which is just north of the Jezreel Valley. Now, the Jezreel Valley is famous because it's a great agricultural area, but also many battles, many wars took place there all throughout history. So Nazareth was this tiny little town, nondescript. It was relatively isolated. It was an agricultural village, and at the time of Jesus, there was a population of less than 200 people. Nobody cared about Nazareth. There was nothing significant about it. It was not strategic in any way. In the first century, like I said, only a couple hundred people. Today, Nazareth is this sprawling city. There's approximately 80,000 people living in Nazareth, over 125,000 if you include the suburbs. Nazareth is identified as being the Arab capital of Israel right now. 85% plus of the population today is Muslim. Only about 15 or less percent of the population is Christian. I mean, it is congested. It is packed. This picture here, you can see that basilica, that cone-shaped building. That is the Basilica of the Annunciation, and that is built in Old Nazareth. Now, the Basilica of the Annunciation was built on top of a Byzantine church. Now, that's significant because Byzantine churches were built in the 300s. Okay, and that means that the Byzantine church were built on top of archaeologically significant places. Okay, so the Roman Catholic Church believes that the Basilica of the Annunciation is built on top of Mary's home, where the angel Gabriel would have come and announced the birth of Jesus. If you go to the lower grotto of the church, okay, you see the remains of the Byzantine church there. And this is where it's believed that Mary lived. All right, the truth is, possibly could be. We're not absolutely positively sure. But there have been very few residential buildings found in the old Jewish village. I mean, here's a picture of a modest one. It basically consists of 2 different rooms in a small courtyard and a cistern to collect rainwater for drinking. So it was a very small agricultural village. Well, this episode, season 1, episode 5, is talking about the wedding in Cana. Now, if you're in Israel, they actually say it's Cana, not Cana. But so here is the wedding in Cana. It's found in John chapter 2. On the 3rd day, a wedding took place in Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." Now, we don't know a whole lot about weddings in the 1st century, but what we do know is they lasted for extended periods of time, up to a week. And so when they ran out of wine, that wasn't just a minor issue. That was a major faux pas. That would have brought disgrace on the family. And so Jesus' mother goes to Jesus and says, "They have no more wine." Here's Jesus, "Woman, why do you involve me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." So nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Now think of this. That's 120 to 180 gallons of water/wine. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." You see, what Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Now, I love how John uses the word signs, because signs point in a direction. These miracles, these signs that Jesus was performing, were pointing to him as being the Messiah, the chosen one of God. And so the wedding in Cana, this miracle of changing water into wine, was the start of his public ministry. It's powerful. Yeah, Jesus performed miracles prior, but he always told people to keep it quiet. And now it's the start of his public ministry. It's known among the people. In this episode, the Apostle Thomas is identified as being a caterer, and his business partner Ramah was a vintner, and they were preparing the wine for the wedding. Jesus and his students make their way to the wedding, while John the Baptizer explains his ministry and Jesus' ministry to Nicodemus. And during the wedding, Thaddeus and little James share with Mary Magdalene, Simon, and Andrew how Jesus called them. And all at the same time, Thomas and Ramah worry as the wine runs low. Now, don't forget, here in The Chosen, Dallas Jenkins and the authors of The Chosen, they added backstory in order to tell the story, right? So all of this is made up. We don't know a whole lot about Thomas. What we do know comes from other historical writings, namely the Apocrypha, that Thomas also was a carpenter and that he could build plows and boats. And Ramah, well, she's a made-up character. Okay, the Hebrew word Ramah means an elevated place, and it's used a couple of times in the scripture. But in the New Testament, there's no woman named Ramah. All right, so all of that is made up. And Nicodemus, the Pharisee, going to talk to John in prison, once again, is just backstory. Now, it's interesting because here in episode 1, verse 5, Thomas and Ramah kind of have this relationship, right? They're dating. Oh, that was extremely controversial among the watchers of The Chosen. In the scripture, there's no indication that Thomas was dating anybody. Now, what we do know is that Simon Peter was married, right? So the scripture tells us that. Now, some of the other disciples, they could have been married. They could have been in relationships. But once again, the scripture doesn't tell us. And so Ramah, as I said, was a made-up character. But we read it before. Remember when Mary Magdalene was healed? And the scripture goes ahead and it lists some other women. And it also says, and many more followed Jesus. And so what Dallas Jenkins and the authors of The Chosen are simply doing with the character of Ramah is saying, other women followed Jesus. Other women ministered to him and ministered to people. Okay? And when you think of Thomas, what is Thomas known for? Could you picture being known all throughout history as being doubting Thomas? It was in John chapter 20. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hands into his side, I will not believe. Doubting Thomas. Thomas is known as being a skeptic. I mean, maybe Thomas was just inquisitive. I mean, maybe Thomas was like a scientist and he's looking to prove a theory. But you know what's interesting is Thomas wasn't always doubting. There's one point in the scriptures, it was in John chapter 11. Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. See, Thomas could be extremely bold at times as well. In episode 5, there was this discourse between Jesus and Thomas that I thought was powerful. I mean, I loved it. Here's how it reads. It's going to be like that sometimes, Thomas. I do not rebuke you. It is good to ask questions, to seek understanding. I know a man like you in Capernaum, Matthew, always counting, always measuring. Join me, and I will show you a new way to count and measure, a new way to see time. Keep watching. I mean, I thought that little discourse was powerful. Okay, because you know what? Christianity is an informed faith. Nowhere in Scripture are we told to set down our intellect and blindly believe. Jesus says, seek. It's good to ask questions, but my friends, just don't ask questions. Seek the answers. See, in our episode, Learning the Wine is Gone, Mary immediately asks her son Jesus to intervene on behalf of the bridegroom's family. And she tells the servants to do everything that Jesus says. Then Jesus instructs them to fill the 6 jars with water, and the servants obey. And yet there's Thomas, right? Kind of expressing his doubts. Jesus invites Thomas to join him, and seeing that the jars are full, Jesus has everyone step outside. Subsequently, Jesus signals the start of his public ministry as he prays his readiness to his Father, turning water into wine. When Ramah and the other servants served the wine, The master of the banquet exclaimed it was the best wine he had ever tasted, saving the reputation of the bridegroom's family and the reputation of Thomas and Ramah. Mary thanked Jesus for the miracle, and then realizing the miracle, Thomas and Ramah accept the invitation to join and to meet Jesus in Samaria in 12 days. Once again, there's a little bit of backstory intertwined there with the historical facts of what really took place. But what a powerful episode as Jesus turned water into wine and begins his public ministry. Hey, thanks for joining me. You have a great day. God bless and live love.